You can lose gloriously and you can lose ingloriously. We had done the latter.
Ronald Dale Barassi, born on the 27th of the 2nd, 1936. He played 253 games, 203 with Melbourne and 50 with Carlton from 1953 to 1969. He coached Carlton from 1965 to 1971 and then moved on to North Melbourne in 1973, where he is still coaching today. He has coached in 343 games, including 9 grand finals for 4 premierships.
I would say losing the grand final by less than a goal, one kick, is the ultimate in disappointment.
Thomas Stanley Hafey, born on the 5th of the 8th, 1931. He played 66 games for Richmond from 1953 to 1958. He coached the Tigers from 1966 to 1976, and in 1977 accepted the coaching position at Collingwood. He has coached in 342 games, including 8 grand finals for 4 premierships.
I was a physical contact man in coaching and training.
Alan Lindsay Jeans was born on the 21st of the 9th, 1933. He played 77 games with St Kilda from 1955 to 1959. He coached St Kilda from 1961 to 1976 for a total of 338 games, including 3 grand final appearances.
I laid there and they were saying that Collingwood were coming back, and I just, I said, oh, I don't want to see this.
Alexander Jesaulenko, born on the 2nd of the 8th, 1945. He played 274 games with Carlton from 1967 to 1979 and St Kilda, where he crossed for season 1980. He coached Carlton from 1978 to 79 and St Kilda after the second round of the season. He has coached a total of 62 games, including 1 grand final appearance for 1 premiership.
It was a very, very heavy week for us, as they say, because we had a very traumatic experience with Peter Crimmins, who'd struggled all the year to be in the team.
John James Kennedy, born 29th of the 12th, 1928, played 169 games for Hawthorn from 1950 to 1959. He became coach of Hawthorn in 1960, where he stayed until 1963. He came out of retirement in 1967 to coach the Hawks until 1976 for a total of 299 games. Kennedy coached in 5 grand finals for 3 premierships.
I believe loyalty has dropped out of clubs a bit because the professionalism and the monetary gains have been the first requirement of a player.
John Robert Nicholls, born 13th of the 8th, 1939. He played 331 games with Carlton from 1957 to 1974. He coached the Blues from 1972 to 1975 for a total of 72 games, including 2 grand final appearances for 1 premiership.
The game certainly was a hell of a lot more physical in the past. Our players wouldn't understand that either. The game was a physical game in the past.
David Alexander Parkin, born the 12th of the 9th, 1942. He played for Hawthorn in 211 games from 1961 to 1974. He coached the Hawks from 1977 to the present day in 91 games, including 1 grand final appearance for 1 premiership.
In, say, June, when it was a certainty that the Collingwood team was going to be in the finals, and this happened year after year, the people in the street would comment, "Are you going to let us down again?"
Robert Arthur Rose, born the 7th of the 8th, 1928. He played 152 games for Collingwood from 1946 to 1955. He became coach in 1964 until 1971, when he went to Footscray in 1972 until 1974. He coached a total of 236 games, including 3 grand finals, but failed to win a premiership. Tonight, these men will have the final say.
Football blazed through the 70s, drastically reshaping and accelerating a game that Australians have loved to call their own for more than a century. It was the decade of the big spending administrators and slick handball-orientated teams, but it was an era in which the limelight swung directly onto the men who pulled the strings, made the moves, and ultimately shouldered the responsibility for success or failure. It will go down as the era of the coaches. There were giants on the field, of course, but the public hung on every word uttered by the Hafeys, Kennedys, and that master coach, Ron Barassi. In all, 42 men, all with impeccable football credentials, tried to win the game's biggest prize. Only 6 were destined to take their side to a premiership in the 70s. And tonight, we've gathered the grand final coaches of the decade just past for their final say. It was here, on the Melbourne cricket grounds, arguably Australia's most famous stadium, that Carlton and Collingwood clashed for the biggest showdown in football history. The stands are really empty now. But in 1970, a record crowd of more than 121,000 people saw the Blues and the Magpies battle it out for the flag. But that Carlton's coach of that day, Ron Barassi, take up the story.
A lot of people think that Carlton's revival began with that second half. Nick and the players, and we all agreed that we felt just in the last 5 or 6 minutes of the first half, we were starting to get even more of the ball. It wasn't showing so much on the scoreboard because we had such a leeway to make up. But
that's right. I think, you know, you have a feeling how quarters are going and how the games are going, and the first quarter and most of the second quarter, I think everyone had the feeling that, you know, we didn't look like getting a touch. But just before half-time, you know, we started to get more confidence, and whilst we didn't score goals, you know, we came in at half-time at least feeling that, you know, we'd turned the corner. And I think, you know, probably at half-time, whilst, you know, as all coaches sort of, particularly when you're 40-odd points down at half-time in grand finals, you get absolutely desperate as to what to do. And I'm sure that was probably one of the turning points when, you know, really desperation point of view, looking back on the way football is now, but in 1970 that was really the starting of, you know, of just handball at all costs. And whilst, you know, we know nowadays it's happening, but really the second half of 1970 was, you know, plus Hopkins, you know, was the start of just play on regardless from that back pocket and from handballing over the man the mark, and you know, more so than we've been doing in previous games, but particularly, you know, Collingwood were just so fast, or so much faster than us in the first half. We just had to try and get some run in the movement of the ball, and it really started at half-time when Brass, amongst other things, just you know, sort of rammed into us, just play on, handball, look, you know, no, we can't be any worse, we've just got to try something, and that's really when it started, you know, plus Teddy Hopkins.
people always ask, you know, what happened to Hopkins afterwards? Well, Hoppy's one of those guys who really had to be at absolute top of their enthusiasm to really make it, and no one can be at the top of enthusiasm all the time. It was interesting, even on that replay where Hopkins in the last quarter, and he'd done his terrific job in the third quarter to help Carlton get back. You know, he missed from point-blank range hit the post. They were the sorts of things that stopped Hopkins from becoming a regular player. But he, regardless of that, I think Nick would agree, he'd go down Carlton's history forever.
Jackson goes after it now. Look at this fella go. Jackson a long hand pass to Hopkins. Hopkins steadies, Hopkins kicks. He's put it through.
One point that could be useful for all of football out of that was just how important discipline was. We're all committed to this only measure left to counter Collingwood's ascendancy, which was handball, let's say that. And I can remember one of our players gave a inaccurate handball about 5 yards from our own goal, our defending goal, and it was intercepted by Des Tuddenham. And he was only 2 or 3 steps out from goal, and miraculously Peter Jones claimed him in a tackle and was paid to free. Now, normally you'd think a player would go back on his shoulder and say, oh, gee, we just made a mistake, and I can't do any handballs now, I've just made a stupid one and lucky to get out of it. But straight away, he handballed, which shows the discipline the players had without, I'm sure all the coaches agree, you just can't win premierships without it.
Have you watched the replay many times, Phil?
Three years went by before I looked at it.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever watched the replays outside of just here today of the matches that we've lost at grand finals, I can tell you.
As a matter of fact, I went back a couple of days ago through some cuttings that I have, and just to get a few more facts and figures about exactly what did happen. I really believe that if McKenna, I'm not looking for excuses, I'm looking for reasons, I always have. And McKenna had kicked 8, 9 and 9 goals in the 3 games that year against Carlton. And he had 5 during the second quarter against Carlton in the grand final, which is not a bad year's performance. And with his injury and falling away, he had 8 kicks in the first quarter and dropped down to 2 in the second quarter. And he only kicked 1 more goal in the second half. And now that I really believe we still shouldn't have lost the premiership. There's no doubt about that. It was bad play generally, but that with McKenna 100% fit, I would have topped things.
Bob, do you think there's such a? Is it correct to say that the gods are with you or against you in a grand final?
Oh, I think you've summed it up pretty well from my position. In, say, June, when it was a certainty that the Collingwood team was going to be in the finals, and this happened year after year, the people in the street would comment, are you going to let us down again? And this is the type of comment that the players have to put up with in the last couple of months, and when you get to the September period, only the very strong players get on top of it. I believe with Tom coming to Collingwood, that's been a very good thing for the club. We have now an outside coach. It doesn't sound quite nice, Tom, but I mean it as a compliment. and Tom's different thinking. I believe that we've got away from that in the last couple of years, but there was a problem around about 1970.
Oh, it's got to go any second, Michael. Half a minute to play, I reckon. Fantastic. There's the kick now, down to the half-forward flank. A mark to Gallagher. There's a siren. Carlton are premiers, and look at what Barassi surrounded. Carlton are premiers, and our commiserations to Bob Rose of Collingwood. It's happened again to him, and nobody could be sorrier for Bob Rose than the three of us up here.
12 months later, neither Carlton nor Collingwood were on the scene for the 1971 grand final. In 71, it was a bruising affair between John Kennedy's Hawthorn, in the eyes of many, Kennedy's Commandos, and Alan Jean's St Kilda. In addition, all eyes were on Hawthorn's champion spearhead Peter Hudson, who up until the grand final had kicked 146 goals for the season. He therefore needed 4 to equal Bob Pratt's long-standing record.
At that stage, the emphasis was on winning the ball at all costs and kicking it as far as you could, and not twisting and turning too much, playing so that the fellow up the field knew where the ball was going. And our opponents knew that too, because they knew we were predictable, but at the same time we knew it. And in a tight finish, if you can predict what your teammate up the field is going to do without having to think about it, well, I think you have some advantages. In other words, you play in a tight finish almost through habit. And we tried to do that, and that year, of course, I remember thinking at three-quarter time when going out when Alan's team were about 3 or 4 goals in front, I thought, well, you know, what a rotten thing to happen to us. We've won 19 matches, we fell in the semi-final, and is this going to be the day when we lose? But I think the players thought that too. They must have been thinking the same thing, and they dragged a little bit more out in the last quarter.
The thing that comes to mind is that when we left John, I remember John saying, well, it's a grand final, we've worked this hard for this long, that we ought, if we're going to go down, we ought to go down with a bang. And he was talking in the sense that we might lose the thing. And I remember Scotty, you know, I was captain of the Sky, but Scotty brought the blokes together again, or so they grouped up again, they went away, and he said, what's he talking about losing? He said, we'll win it. And I think Scott set the patterns, as Alan has already mentioned, from the centre bouncers, and we just pushed forward continually during that last quarter, and I didn't think at any stage then we felt as if we could lose the game, even though it took us a while to peg them back. I thought we were playing pretty well at that stage. Scott's leadership, I've seen over a long period of time some great leaders on the field, you know, Tuddenham and Barassi and people like that, who I think were magnificent leaders because they could do incredible things when they were required to be done. A lot of players can do incredible things often in a game, but it's being able to produce them when they really do have to be done. And Scotty's had this uncanny ability in finals, in grand finals particularly, to be able to pull out the very best, to give direction to the side. And some of his work in the centre bounces there at the start of that last quarter was the direction that the side needed.
If you had your time over again in that game, was there anything you would have done? Yes, I sort of blame myself a little bit for some of the things that happen when you sit down and analyse the game after, and I thought I made a mistake when I should have put Galt on. When Bob Murray went down, I should have put Galt on. I think the height was a big factor, and then when it came to the stage in the last quarter, I had Trott was been knocked out, I think, a couple of times for the day, and Manzi had had cut his eye and he had lost vision in one eye, and I had the problem of two of them, and I wasn't game to take a player off there, and I was too late putting Galt on at that stage, and Scotty by that time was really starting to dominate the game, and by the time I got Galty on, he did give us a lift a bit in the ruck, and we were able to come back a bit.
What did you find a good quality that Kennedy had as a coach?
People over a long period of time have talked about John in many senses of his makeup and his coaching ability. I think that John's always had the ability to make decisions in the most objective way I've ever seen people make decisions, without fear or favour. I can remember sitting on a match committee when I stood down as captain, I think in '73, and in '74 I was still struggling to get in the side and play in a final series. And when you're sitting on match committee and you want to play and you reckon you should be in the side, and you can look in the eye and say that you shouldn't be in the side, you're not good enough to be in the side, you can accept it from someone like John because you know it's an objective decision made for the purpose of the team doing the very best on the day. And John's that sort of person who can make those decisions, even though he might, in a sense, be difficult to make because of the relationship he has with the people. I haven't met too many people who can do that in this world.
Right down towards the half-forward flank with Heath does a diving mark and it's paid. Picks up out to the half-back flank, they set themselves. Up they go and there's a good mark. Scott comes around on his left foot, goes to the half-forward flank, up they go. Beautiful mark. Moore drives the ball around the wing. Over to the left comes Moran, a great mark in the ball. Moore now up towards centre half-forward, Hudson moves in, goes up high, he's marked. Hudson is marked, kick forward, taken by Matthews. Matthews a hand pass to Hudson. Hudson going for a run. He steadies, he kicks. Oh my God, he's missed it. Oh, look at him. He's put it out of bounds on the full. Goes straight up the ground, players move into it there. Pushed across to Judson. Judson surrounded by Hawthorn players, but he'll get a free kick. Hard way to get it, but he's got the free kick. Judson, time running out for the Saints. It's a long quarter, this one. Judson takes his kick, goes to the flank position on the outer side. The sun comes out as the ball hits the ground and Heath sends it back to the weak position. Siren goes! Siren goes! Hawthorn are premiers 1971 as John Kennedy is being hugged and congratulated.
Hawthorn's hopes of another premiership in 1972 crashed to the Glenferrie Oval turf in the first match of the new season. But while the Hawks were licking their wounds, the Tigers and the Tom Hafey and the Blues and the Big Nick were preparing for two classic confrontations.
We didn't miss by much in '72. It was only a whisker, and we had Hudson injured in the first match after he'd kicked 8 goals to half-time. He was a football genius, and he was going to get better. He had 8 up at half-time, and it was the first year that he'd trained really hard, and I suppose you think he'll never train again. but he meant a lot, and though when he went, we were just as determined that we were going to get there, his absence meant a bit too. Not that, I mean, you overcome injuries, but we didn't miss by much, but, well, we missed.
We had played Carlton, I think, on 4 occasions prior to that. They drew in the, second semi, I think it was now. Can't quite remember. Preliminary final. And that was the only time they'd got close to us outside of the grand final. And I guess now I would have preferred perhaps Carlton to have won that preliminary final because it might have let them go into the grand final with possibly the same sort of lineup as what they'd had previously against us. I was most disappointed, you know, but it was a real freak sort of a game, particularly by Carlton. I didn't think the scores were any real indication of the play because I thought they had played us, you know, by many, many goals. I thought we were struggling all day long, you know, and I know the scoreboard only showed, I think, 27 points at the end of the day, but I think that we were probably, say, even a bit blessed to get within that
Tom?
Close.
A lot of people ask, how could Richmond, with so many players down and so few good players, kick those enormous number of goals? I could never figure out why.
Well, I guess that the players we had down were mainly on the back line, but I think that when we look at our side, we were very critical of our whole back line for the entire year, and we kept on saying, you know, I hope we can carry it through, but we tried many different things throughout the year. We just didn't have versatile players for the back line. If a player got beaten into position, we couldn't do a great deal about it. As a result, in 1973, when the 10-year rule came in, we tried to get the likes of Johnny Rantell, Barry Davis, you know, boys who could be switched from half-back flank to full-back or centre-half-back or something like that. And on this particular day, well, everything worked well for Carlton. I think that big Percy Jones played a very big, important part of their... You know, yes, I think so too. You know, I felt that he had the most influence because of the fact that Carlton won the ball out of the centre to put pressure on our weak back line. You know, and unfortunately we had boys on the back line who weren't really defenders, but they were put in defence because they were the best players we had at the club. But I think it's worth mentioning that it was really quite freakish that 3 players between them kicked 19 goals too, and for a side to kick 28 goals 9, you know, you'd agree that that's a fantastic score, but 9 points from, you know, only what, 30... Well, right. Yeah, about 37 scoring shots or something like that, whereas we kicked 22-18. You know, so we had a bit of the ball, but, you know, I don't think you could expect 3 players to kick 19-2, and that's exactly what they did do. I think Robert Walls kicked 6 and Jezza kicked 7, you kicked 6.
A tremendous effort. Look, the scoreboard tells the story. What a great effort. Richmond 22-18. It would have won any other grand final that you could possibly think of except this one, because Carlton are 28-9. A wrestle on the ground there. Don't get too hot now, fellas. We wait for umpire Bill Della. We've got to give him a rap too. Great job. He bounces the ball in the centre. Up they go. Nicholls is there. Taps the ball down. It's taken by Bartlett. Kevin Bartlett to the half-forward flank on the member stand side, but O'Connell stands firm and takes the mark. O'Connell of Carlton limping. Players, they must be dog-tired out there. There's a siren. Siren. Carlton have won it. Carlton have won it. And they're going mad here at the MCG. The Blues have won it, and the final scoreboard reads Carlton 28-9, 177. Richmond 22-18, 150. I must say this about Tommy Hafey, and I say this from personal knowledge. I don't think any guy has ever worked harder for a premiership than Tom. And he's dejected because Tommy would take this very, very much to heart. On the other hand, the jubilant Carlton players now doing their lap of honour. The capacity crowd at the MCG saw Carlton take out the 1972 flag in a most workmanlike and brilliant fashion. They deserved it.
In 1973, these stands shuddered when Carlton's captain coach John Nicholls was crashed to the ground. And without their captain coach firing, the Blues faded against the Richmond side regarded by many as perhaps the best ever to take out a premiership. And in 1974, they followed it up with similar success, the Tigers that is, when they went in against Ron Barassi's success-starved Roos.
That particular day, Fowler gave me a hard knock in the first quarter early, and whilst I felt I was all right, you know, I know now looking back on it afterwards and after the game that I probably didn't have a good enough liaison between, you know, being the general on the field and my non-playing members off the field, and I didn't realise at the time, and they didn't realise that I'd been probably stunned as much as I was, but I felt that the biggest thing in 73 was the loss of Keogh and Armstrong before I started, and I think as results proved it afterwards that you know, our roving division that year was really horrible on the day.
Where it's Southby and Barnes pushed away by Wade and Southby. And Southby goes high. And this one too high. Is up in front, gets it down. It's taken by Barnes. His kick smothered. Coming up. He's gone. Long kick from Hall down towards the pocket. Davis is there, and a great mark by Davis. Drives it forward. McGee's there, and a good mark taken by Robert McGee.
Flank on that outer side. Jesaulenko's there, but Stewart. Oh, fantastic.
It goes back across the face. There's Walsh and Bell. A great mark by Bell.
Forward. Up they go. Oh, what a good mark.
Yeah, waits up high. Taken by Davis. He puts it over the top.
Chandler. Sheedy recovers well, kicks to the half-forward flank on the member stand side. Mike Green comes out there, traps the ball in soccer fashion. A hand pass by Green, it'll come off. Half pushing the ball in front of him. The siren goes! Siren goes! Richmond are premiers!
I think grand final is like a heavyweight championship of the world bout. I mean, there's things go on a grand final and things that you see that you never see during the year, and players who go into a grand final not realising that that's going to be so, they get a very rude awakening.
Was that the case in '74, Brass, when North played Richmond?
Yes, I think so. Not the same sort of thing that John's talking about, but you know, the fierceness of it, the desperation shown. There were 2 or 3 of our inexperienced guys, and one that even if you wouldn't expect, a few you would expect, they just completely crumbled. And you know, you often see guys in the grand final play their worst game of the year, and that particularly applies to the young stars. You know, it's just the pressure on that is absolutely enormous. It's not appreciated by the public, and also not appreciated by some young players.
Did you feel confident in 1974 of winning the grand final on that particular day?
Yes, I felt confident. You always feel confident, don't you? I wouldn't say it was a unbelievable, we can't possibly lose sort of super confidence, but sure we were confident. But we probably recognised that we had to play at our top, things had to go right, we had to try and make them go right and all those sort of things. But you asked the question, yes, we were confident. Now, you're the last team and the only team, I think, to win 2 in a row. Was there anything that really helped you do that, whereas other coaches and clubs and teams have failed to do so? Well, I know you had a good side,
yeah,
actually.
Sure. I think that 1972's loss was one of the real driving forces behind our 73 win for a start. I can remember after the game Paul Sproul saying to me, who incidentally played a fantastic game in '73, said to me, "You had your easiest day of your life today." He said there was no known way our players were going to get beaten today. That's the way he felt after the game.
This is
in 73.
Yeah.
Well, in 74, I do believe that we did have a very good side in 74, and probably the point had been put right throughout the whole year that it had been up until then about 15 or 16 years since sides had won double premierships.
Business out at Windy Hill and the subsequent happenings
brought the players closer together. Yes, I do. Yeah, I think the media did help us, although they didn't mean to, because I think they did everything to probably hinder us, but I do believe it brought our club a lot closer together. We got very bad publicity right throughout the year, starting from that, which probably wasn't our, we weren't the only culprits in that particular incident, and yet we were made to look pretty big villains right throughout, and the club was terribly close, and I do believe that did help. And also, let's face it, North Melbourne at that stage were only on the come on, and they were inexperienced final players, so that probably helped us a little bit as well.
If you were going for a 2 in a row again, would you, in the second year, if you could, and do it surreptitiously, organise something that would bring the players together, like a,
like blast the umpires or something like that?
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Well, would you?
I think you'd have to.
Ron, can I ask one question here? You blasted the North Melbourne players at the grand final dinner at the end of '74.
Both the president and myself had something to say.
It was pretty tense, wasn't it?
Yes. The point we made was, because the players were clapped in the dressing room, and we hadn't played well enough to be clapped, and it doesn't matter if it's a grand final or how well you've done, you're there to win that. And I remember Mick Aylett he was steaming that the cheering should go on, because we were losers. And you can lose gloriously and you can lose ingloriously. We had done the latter. And I grabbed him first and said, "No, let me go first, because I'm an outsider. It's going to come better for me going first on this point." But talking to Mick later, he can remember in the bad old days at North, when North weren't winning many matches and he was a player, the same sort of thing going on after they'd played Melbourne on the MCG and they'd been beaten by 5 goals. And it wasn't a bad sort of effort. And he remember saying to himself, he felt like smashing the back slappers on the back, because how can you be patted on the back and you've lost? And this point was really rammed home by both the President and myself. And I don't know whether that carried over till next year. Next year we were a better side anyway, and that year's experience definitely did help.
There's Tommy Hafey right in the middle of that. Their second successive premiership. What a thrill for them.
A great performance, Mike, and, well, as you said before, a real professional football team, aren't they? And, of course, North Melbourne went down fighting, but they weren't good enough in that last or just after half-time, and we saw many tries for North, but when you look at the Richmond side, when the press was really applied, they had many good players.
And there on the other hand is Ron Barassi going around to his boys. And it's a scene we've seen before in grand finals. The defeated side just dejected. But North Melbourne, take heart. You've played your hearts out, boys.
Well, they certainly weren't disgraced.
North reacted savagely to that humiliating defeat in 1974, trimming their ranks and continuing a nationwide search for football talent regardless of the cost. So in September 1975, with the side bolstered with champions like skipper Barry Davis, spearhead Doug Wade, defender John Rantell and the game's top rover Barry Cable, North was striving for a place in the history books. For Hawthorn, it was to be a sad climax as John Kennedy's players watch illness ravage their skipper Peter Crimmins.
It was a very, very heavy week for us, as they say, because we had a very traumatic experience with Peter Crimmins, who'd struggled all the year to be in the team.
Did it mean much?
Oh, it meant an enormous amount of... Well, I don't know how much it would have meant or didn't mean, but it meant a lot to me, coaching, because despite what people might think, the responsibility for Peter being in the side or out of the side was mine. And while it may be true to say that he may not have been fit, I only had to say I want him in the team, and he would have been in the team. So ultimately it was my responsibility, and I wasn't quite game enough to do that, because I had all sorts of visions of a player coming on and going off and being used up just for the team. So that we took the field, and I think that many of the team would have perhaps been given a lift had Peter been there, but he wasn't, and I wouldn't take anything from North Melbourne, because the way they played and the way they finished, and they had a smell of the first premiership, and I don't think any side would have stopped them when they saw victory in their grasp, and that was their first premiership, and when you get 18 fellows after the one thing with such an intense desire and coached by Barassi, it's pretty hard to do much about it. And we were whipped, and we had to suffer the disgrace of having people around the club say, I don't think Hawthorn tried. But it certainly enabled us to sow a few seeds for the next year, and it, you know, although we were badly beaten in 75, it made everybody very close together for 76, and that's about the only good we got out of it, I think.
It was magic, it really was. First of something special. Not many people in the modern era can claim that joy.
First.
Hawthorn 61, Footscray 54, and St Kilda 66, and North Melbourne 75. All the other famous clubs had their go a long while ago at the first. But I can remember going back to the social club afterwards, and I'd been pleasured in grand finals myself before, and I'd been spoiled in that regard. So my greatest pleasure that night was watching the old supporters, you know, 50, 60 and 70-year-olds, just
Doug down
the pleasure. Oh, those people too, but they were just beside themselves, and, you know, they were saying, you know, if I die now, it doesn't matter, sort of thing. It was absolutely magnificent.
We had a meeting about 3 weeks afterwards down at the club. All the chaps in the side, and myself, and we talked about what was said about our team in the 75 grand final. And as one of the ones connected with it, I said I didn't believe what was said, but I could understand it being said because of the way we played. And certain of us who had played badly in that 75 grand final did play extremely well in 76 grand final, and I think they were out to vindicate their own honour, as it were, and make sure that those things that were said about them then would not be said about them again. There are qualities you see in players that come out probably better when they're beaten than when they win, and we had a chap on the half-back flank that day, Jaworski, who...
South Australian.
Yes, and he had Kekovich coming flat out at him, and we were losing the match, and we looked like losing it, and the ball bouncing right up in the sky, and he was out there on the wing, and Bug stood his ground, and he met Keka, who was full bore and in full flight, and it knocked him out, but he got up again, and he played a wonderful game, and Martello did that day too. Despite the fact that we were beaten and nobody was interested, I was tremendously pleased with their games.
He's going to boot the ball long, up towards Wade. What's going to happen now? The ball's pushed to the ground. Kekovich trying to get clear. Gets a hand pass. Brenda's missed it. There's Wade going for a goal. Oh! He's kicked the point. Doubled in from the half-back flank. Hand passes to Carlton. Carlton gets it across here to Malcolm Blight. Malcolm Blight gets it down into the forward zone once again. No mark. Chance here for Burns. He's going to be tackled by Welsh. A long hand pass to Arnold Bridus. Bridus steadies. He shoots at the big ones. And there's another one. Goodingham comes in once again. He taps it down once again too. But it's taken there and driven out of danger by Ablett. It's on the wing position. Taken here by Hendry of Hawthorn. Hendry tries a hand pass over here towards Trott. Trott. He deep into the forward zone. They back there. Or Murphy. No free kick picked up by Moncrief. He screws it over his shoulder. This should be good. And it is. Bounced by Kevin Smith. Martello gets right across the back of Goodingham. Right over the top, and Goodingham will take the free kick. Barry Goodingham. It's a big kick too. To the centre half forward position. Scott knocks the ball away. The ball is picked up by Jaworski. Back in towards the centre here. This is a pretty long quarter. In they come. It's North Melbourne through Chisnell, getting that ball to the half forward flank on the northern side of the ground. Trotters after it. There's a siren. Siren's gone. North Melbourne's first ever flag. And the final scoreboard now reads at the MCG in the 1975 Grand Final. The final scoreboard reads North Melbourne 19-8, 122, Hawthorn 9-13, 67. And just have a look at these scenes. Louis, you can't help but feel elated.
And there's Kennedy going off. It's very sad for Kennedy, but he's done a great job with Hawthorn. He's had 2 premierships. Barassi, you've got to give him full marks, a marvel. Of course, he asked for special stipulations when he went to North Melbourne. He wanted players, and he got the players, and he's won the flag after, what, 3 years with them. A tremendous performance.
Well, we're talking about the 70s, and so I can talk about Carlton and North Melbourne. And nearly every final that Carlton played in, Nicholls and Silvani were there amongst either the best on the ground or certainly the best for the side, and that's a fantastic feat, because I believe that's when the real chips are down, and that's when it's all shown. But Crane was one of my favourites, and Nicks too, for that sort of reason, a real just guts, you know, guts. That's what wins premierships. But they're both talented sides, aren't they? I think we'll agree it's the heart that wins generally.
Oh, well, Tuddenham comes to mind first of all. He played some great finals games, and he just refused to accept defeat, and was so ferocious about it at quarter time or half time if we were in trouble, that he really did everything to enthuse the players to have the same, you know, as Ron said, guts. And, you know, we're not allowed to lose it. It gets to that stage. We have to win, and Tuddenham was the outstanding guy. A fellow who was most underestimated as a tremendous team player was Ted Potter. Courageous player, not all the skill in the world, but his tackling and his ability to be able to concentrate against, you know, he came up week after week against Hart, Jesaulenko, Baldock. He played against those, I've seen him play against those 3 absolute star players 3 weeks in a row and at least hold them, if not beat them. And Potter had that tremendous courage and will to win and team spirit that we want. Coaches have to have them in finals, and so they're 2 outstanding examples that come to my mind quickest.
Just quickly, you know, I've got to mention North Melbourne because we have played in some finals. fellas like Cable and Schimmelbusch, extraordinary types. And others you could go on, I'm sure Bob's got about 10 and I've got about 10.
Perhaps it'd be fair to say that, you know, grand finals really aren't won. You may get away with, if you were to look at your 20 players and try and say, you know, put them in categories of courage and reliability, you can't win grand finals with too many on the wrong side.
While I was sitting here listening to what the other coaches did say, I was thinking of different ones who I could name, but then the list got so long, I thought, well, why should I exclude somebody else? You know, I just believe that probably the sides that we had at that period, we had a lot of players who just would give of their all, and I used to say that we had a lot of captain types on the field, you know, and I can look back at it now and think that, gee, there was just players who just did not play a bad game in finals in all of their career. So I just wouldn't like to single anyone out because, you know, well, I love them so much, and I think it would be unfair to, you know, to rate them in any way.
Versus Barassi. What a classic confrontation for the 1976 flag. John Kennedy, the only man to coach Hawthorn the premierships in 61 and 71, and also to their only other grand final appearances in 63 and 75. It was, however, to prove to be the final time that the man in the old gabardine overcoat was to coach the Hawks.
Well, in 76, Henry played a tremendous game. He could have kicked anything like 8 or 9 goals that he kicked straight. And then, of course, Knightsey saved the game in the end with tremendous marks, and Scotty kept everybody interested, the way he was running and kicking the ball and giving plenty of cheek, and Matthews, all, of course, when you win, everybody chips in, as you know, but the side was well led in 76, and there was a very great fierceness about the side that is something that you want and you don't forget when everybody is on edge and they're all thinking the same thing and they're all very nasty and very fierce, and we were like that in 76.
The 76 team was probably the coaching of it and the style of it was extremely good for those players. They probably played the best football. I think they were probably the best side that John coached. I don't know whether you'd agree with that or not, but the 76 side was a very good side.
North Melbourne forward, swings it in towards centre half forward. Up Benedict. But Mike towards Greg. Greg's got the set and taken the mark. A lovely mark by Greg. Greg takes his kick. He is a bit seedy. Up just over the wing position. Hawks at the moment as the ball go on. Brendan got a better go for a goal. Hick running into an open goal. Fires it through. It's through. Beautiful. Hand pass, is it? No, he's gone for a hand pass to Feltham now. It's a dangerous one. Scott's got his go for the goals. And it's a goal. Half-back as they go now for Rick. Hand pass over the Burns. He's got a straight run for the goals. He fires, and it looks pretty good. Tremendous. Up it goes now. All having a go. There's Lethal Lee going for a shot at goals. He doesn't miss. There. Beautiful goal. To send them into attack again. Both sides very tired. But I think Michael will agree that we've never seen a much better defence than Hawthorn have put up here today. They've been magnificent. Impregnable. That's the word. I couldn't think of it as the ball is kicked up towards the full forward zone now. Moncrief goes for the tap. There's Cable driving the ball back towards centre field. Oh, the mark there. That time a beautiful mark to O'Halloran. They've played in front. They've played from behind. They've played him from the side, and they've beat him all day. He's been an absolute rock, O'Halloran, as we wait for him to take his kick. But don't forget, this is North Melbourne's third successive grand final.